Welcome, welcome, and welcome, family. Family, I am so super excited. Guess what? We have made it to the season finale of season one. Yes, it has all came down to this. Everything we've worked for so hard this season has come down to this. Again, big shout out to Kalzura for making it possible for me to be able to share everything, this journey. And again, Kalzura, treat your feet. Again, I'm beyond, happy for being able to have a platform that I can reach out and to, new techs, experienced techs, managers, directors, leaders, being able to just be able to share what I've learned, get experience from other people, and just being able, I'm elated to have just share the experience. And I guess I say that to say I couldn't be here without all of my great guests, um, being able to share this platform with everybody, giving their side of the story, being able to share their experiences, what we could bring to the culture, what we can share with the next person coming in, and helping each other grow. I think that's the biggest thing that I got from this show, and what I hope to bring to everybody is what can we do to help each other grow going forward. Over the course of this season, we covered a lot of different topics, and I want to continue that. I've hit a milestone. Yes, I've completed the first season. And when I say milestone, what better way to recapture all of those little milestones than to recap everything that has happened this season? You talk about new text. We talked about standards. We talked about regulations. We talked about traveling. We talked with infection control. We talked about who's in your village. We talked about how do you strengthen those relationships. We talked about having difficult conversations. How do you resonate with, the that tough conversation? Today we recap how do you tie all of that together and go forward. And I brought somebody along today that's going to help us see where we're at and what does the future look like for sterile processing. I want to touch back on what we talked about. Let's just go back and tidy up what we talked about and take a look at where we're headed. I talk all of this just to say I want to welcome a good friend, David Jagrossi, to the platform. He's a past president of the HSBA. Hey, David Jagrossi Consulting. Everybody knows and loves him. And he's going to help us, just go back over everything that we, talked about, everything that we've learned, share his insight into some of the, things that you had questions about that we can what can we do as leaders to help those people who want to know more about sterile processing, who want to get into sterile processing. He can share some of his knowledge about sterile processing. Welcome, David. How are you, sir?
Thank you, Ken. Thank you. Doing great. It's a big intro, man. You're giving me a big head. I'm gonna have to put the wide lens on.
Hey, when you come to time to talk, that's what we want you to feel welcome. We want you to know that we appreciate you here, and all that that you shared with the culture. Hey, the intro is well warranted, sir.
Thank you. Yeah, no, it's funny. I appreciate and really do appreciate you having me on for the season finale. It's sort of like the live shows are coming back, the live SPD educational events. And when I did a lot of speaking, people would put me on either after lunch or as the show closer, just because I would always be loud and animated and kind of wake people up when they were in their little slumber. So here we are, the end of the year, 8 o'clock on the East Coast. Let's go, man. Let's go.
Hey, I'm gonna jump right into it. So I'm gonna just throw some stuff at you, and I want you to give, what would you say to the topic, your take on what we talked about, and what would you say to the new tech who is into the field and an experienced tech, what they could take away from what we talked about?
Sure.
So just throwing it out there, we talked about new tech training. What can you offer to new tech training?
Yeah, I mean, certainly the world has changed as far as like the resources that we have, and even these formats, and having the ability to have, back in my day, it was you were lucky if the company had a CD or a VHS tape, and then you had to go in the hospital and find the big VHS player. Now you could just pop open your phone, and if you're not creating content in your department, there certainly is all kinds of resources, like even your show. um there's a lot of content out there on LinkedIn, and I think a lot of content. I mean, we all know Beyond Clean is out there, HSPA. Just the formats are so much easier to access, and I think the most beautiful part is that there's not cost to a lot of these educational material. You know,
Right.
um, you want to make sure it's accurate. You want to make sure that. I think if we want to talk a little bit about maybe some of the pitfalls, is that you have to be careful because there is a lot of content out there when you go into the cyber world or online. You might be talking or looking at something that might be from Europe, so that you're looking at ISO or different standards. The Canadians have different standards, the Australians. So you just want to make sure that if you're using that to train your newer technicians, make sure that it's accurate and make sure that it's pertinent to the United States or wherever you're teaching.
Okay. Uh, there was a little debate going around. So, you've been an experienced guy. I want to get your take on it. Do you start your person in decon or do you start them in prep and pack?
Yeah, it's always interesting. It's sort of like it's the chicken and the egg, isn't it? Because you want them to be aware of. I mean, here's the thing: we never just stick someone in decontam by themselves, but it's almost like we want them to be aware of what instruments are, so
Right.
that there's no risk of injury back there. They don't know a Gelpy is sharp. Because we talk about not having sharps in decontam, right? I mean, when
Right.
we refer to that, we're talking about needles and scalpels and everything that went disposable. But we all know in the business, there's still Gelpies, there's still all kinds of sharp iris scissors. There's all kinds of devices back there that can kind of jab us. So there kind of has to be a balance between safety. I used to like to orient people a little bit on instruments just so they had that background, and then not hesitate to get them into decontam. But I always want to keep that safety margin in place, because even paired up with someone, you can easily reach in and grab something and get stuck even through the PPE that we wear.
Yeah, we told people there. I mean, and I reiterated to everybody, there was no wrong way. We were just going back and forth with where do you start somebody when you're oriented to training. And we kind of split. When we had our decon versus our prep and pack, it was kind of evenly split. Our
Yeah.
decon warriors say, hey, you start them in decon because, hey, why go through all that training just to get somebody to decon, and then they say, hey, no, this is not for me. So I get it.
Exactly. Yep.
So yeah, but I get your point too. The safety aspect is you teach them, hey, these are sharp, this is this, versus get them in decon and then they're sticking their hand in the sink and then it's lights out from there. Like, oh, so yeah, I do get it. So okay,
No,
another one.
and
Just
that's interesting, because in my career I've had 3 people pass out on me in decontam, and one of them was during the walkthrough, because when we do the interview, typically you're doing it in the manager's office, but I like to do the walkthrough and I like to include decontam, because I've had a number of candidates look back there and say, they love the job, they were all going forward, and then they see that blood in the back and they say, not for me, like done.
right.
And then some of them will make it past that and they don't realize that in themselves, that whatever the case was, they went back there and got dizzy, and on 3 occasions we had to call a team down in SPD because someone passed out in our decontam room. But
So
standards have
you got a
changed
big shout
also.
out. You got a big shout out from Sharon. You got a big shout out from Casey. Welcome to the platform. All the hellos are coming in. So welcome for joining us, everybody. Um, just on that, we're going to keep it going. And so, new trading, we talk standards. What is your take on the standards as they stand to today's standard? How are we training people to standard these days?
Yeah, we I've in my career I've seen the shift from the standards really getting into, like Amy specifically, telling us as technicians what and how to do things with instruments. And that was the big shift from 2007 and then the revision in 2017, because we had to pull all those little tips and all those little to dos out of the document because everything went over to the IFU. So,
Right.
that was a big change. And, but there still is plenty of room for standards, as far as how we do our jobs. And I think I see it more than ever that people are trained to the IFU and to to the standards. I go into many departments because part of what I do now, being out of the hospital, is doing assessments and preparation or for accreditation surveys. And I see a lot of good out there. I see a lot more good than I see the bad. Unfortunately, people call me in when things are really tough in their departments, but I do get the opportunity through other venues and other avenues to see the really good. And people are really on the mark with the standards. Even when I used to speak, Ken, I used to ask people, how many people have ST79, and you'd see maybe half the hands go up, but I see that more and more now. People know they have it and they're adhering and following it.
Yeah, I see a lot of people now are pushing, and even when I was at the conference, you saw a lot of people saying, "Hey, IFU, IFU, IFU," and adhering to what is actually the letter of the law. And is
Yeah,
that the new wave? Hey, we're going straight to what the IFU says. That is what it is. Hey, Amy Sanders says we do this. Hey, we just had a big push with the CER. Hey, the new revision of the ST91 says we need to do this, 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 and this. So when we're teaching people these things and we're saying, hey, we'll just hit on the scope for just 1 second. It is recommended that you use a borescope and endo to check your scopes. When we say that to an endoscopy unit and the manager gets all crazy, like, how are we going to put in borescope down every scope that comes through endo? We don't have that type of time.
yeah, yeah.
How do we get those people to jump on board with something of that nature?
Yeah, it's difficult. And, you know, there's always, look, first and foremost, as we know, there's always patient safety. But then there also is the fact that we have to pass the accreditation. And if
Right.
that's in the standard, Joint Commission or DNV or whoever your accreditation body is going to come in. And if you're not at least making an attempt, I always say that to people that, like, you face these monumental tasks in front of you, like, how am I ever going to implement this? And I always say to people, something is better than nothing. If you're doing nothing and you do it once or twice, or you're doing scopes, a handful of scopes throughout the day, that is certainly better than doing nothing. And particularly when the accreditation bodies come in, if they see you making that attempt and you have plans, you've had meetings, and you said, we're going to slowly try to implement this, um, they're not going to come down on you typically too hard with that. But if they go in and they see you have the current standard and you're doing zero, then they're going to come down on you pretty hard.
Yeah, I know that people said that they were having a hard time with the whole 10 minutes of air, forced air at the end. That was one of the challenges that people had. So I know that was one of those, like, I can't do that. But there are things out there that can.
Yeah,
so,
yeah,
so like you said, doing nothing is more of the hindrance of, okay, if you're not doing anything, I think that's more of the ding versus we know you know the standard
correct.
versus not being able. So, yeah, so I do get that point. So not doing anything is more of the challenge versus you know the standard, you know what should be being done. Okay, and
Yeah.
Casey put up a
Ken,
comment. Yes,
let me
sir.
tell you this too, that there's always a third realm that I like to bring up, and that's patient safety, um, of course, is at the forefront of everything we do. And that's tied into the last thing that I'm going to tell you. But, we have our standards. We have our standards that are set out by the standards organizations. And it's not just Amy. We have OSHA regulations and things of that nature. Then, we have the Department of Public Health, because we can't forget about them. So we have Joint Commission coming in and checking us against these standards that are out there. You have the Department of Public Health doing the same thing. But in the United States in particular, the other branch, if you will, is the legal system. Because again, in my capacity now, I've worked a number of legal cases, and that's really where things are going to come out. And they say, well, this standard is here. You didn't make any attempts to follow it. There was no sense of any implementation. So you got to always put things in that legal perspective. And one of the interesting things that came up in my mind in the course of a couple of these legal cases was that, when a new standard comes out, like ST91 was just updated,
Yes.
there really is no timeline for implementation. So, like, what is the expectation, Ken? It came out in February, and by March, you're supposed to be there. So that's the conundrum we kind of all face is that, like, what I'm saying is you should, in the least, there should be a risk assessment conducted or some type of meeting conducted saying, hey, the standards have changed. And even if it's going to take your facility a year to get there, then some form of action or acknowledgement needs to take place, because otherwise it just looks like you're ignoring the standard. And they're really, in a legal setting, there's no, all right, the standard came out in January. How long do I have to implement these things? There's really nothing out there that says it's immediate or you have 3 years. But, that's kind of the gray area that, I think more in the legal setting, you should be working faster than putting it off, But
I think that was.
it's
I
interesting.
think that's the main thing, because once the standard changed and I brought it forth, that was the first question the C-suite and everybody had is, well, how long do we have? Like,
Yeah.
I got to check with some people and let me find out, because there
Correct.
was no
Correct.
language. There was no plain language that said you have 6 months or you have a year. So I get what you're saying on that. That is the number one question that everybody had. Well, how long do we have to make this
Correct.
happen?
Correct.
So yeah. So
It was
that
like
is
yesterday, last month.
So yeah. Okay, great points to that. So another thing that we touched on was regulations versus reality. We know what these say versus what you're actually doing at your facility. How do you combat that?
Yeah, that's interesting. And again, I would say this, because I did mention there's other standards in other countries, and a lot of times you'll hear things, and even from myself, that they're ahead of us. ISO, you see, overseas, because it's socialized medicine and government health, it's you have to follow the standards. Whereas here, the strongest language in Amy, for example, is should. But just because they have these robust and strong standards, I've been in a lot of hospitals throughout Europe and Canada, and some of them are worse than what I see sometimes in third world countries, So,
Right.
yeah, I think there's a big gap there. And I think towards that end, maybe towards what the future is bringing, we all know that, and I don't know if it's okay to name names. I mean, there's only 2 companies that I'm aware of out there. There's OneSource that we're all familiar with that does the IFUs online. And then there's Petrus has a product called Bluefin.
Right.
They do IFUs. But I think what there's a little differentiation there is that the Petrus or Bluefin product is starting to get into the IFU comes up and you're checking off each step of the IFU to kind of ensure that compliance. So again, good thing, Ken, but like, now how much is that going to slow me down in decontam, right?
Right.
If I have to like almost do a count sheet. So there's always a check and a balance. And I think towards OneSource's and they're going to maybe go over in the future to an individual login, because right now you just log in as a department, but they're going to
Right.
go to individual logins, so that if a legal issue ever came up, we could go back and see that Ken looked up the IFU for that particular bronchoscope. And but then I don't know about if they're going to get in the future into breaking it down, but at least we could show that you accessed it, So
Okay.
so I think that's coming. And there's a lot of capability with these systems like Sonar, SPM, TDoc. Those systems are getting very smart too. And they do link out to OneSource and these other IFU websites. And you do have the ability to show in a lot of instances that people followed instructions or at least accessed them when they were processing a device. So but there's definitely a gap there. There definitely is reality in a lot of times, and we do got to move away towards that. We gotta do what it depends on the reasoning, I guess. If they're in front of you, I think a majority of it is not that people are choosing to not follow them. I think we're, like you mentioned earlier, Ken, we're under massive demand. We've always done 20 procedures a day, and now we're going to add a boroscope and we have to follow this thing, and we can only do 10 a day, right? So there's a tremendous amount of pressure on us to we're kind of caught in the middle, like we always are in SPD, right? We're caught in the middle between physicians and the standards and all the, what do we always say? We always say you're never told how important your job is until you mess it up, right? So we're expected to be 99.9,
Right.
if not 100% on target with the work that we do. And look, that's the reality of SPD, unfortunately, is we don't get a lot of pats on the back for doing our job consistently and doing it correctly. It's really when that 1% occurs, when there's a mistake, you're really going to hear about it. So it's important. One little funny anecdote, Chuck Hughes back in the day told me that he took he said, if you want recognition in this business, he said, you take a sheet of paper, put it on the table, draw your hand on it, tape it on the wall, and then back yourself up to it and pat yourself on the back. He goes, because that's going to be the best way you get recognition around here. And I remember back in my office, I had one of the lead hands up on my office, and it said the self-recognition tool, and everybody was free to walk up there and give themselves a little pat on the back, So, but yeah, there's definitely a gap. Yeah. But there are tools and technology coming to help kind of close that gap.
So the question then becomes, is instrument, not instrument, I'll say, is throughput an excuse for not following the IFU or not adhering to the standard or regulation all the way?
No, I would say it's not an excuse. And, again, we've got the big three. We've got patient safety. We've got, let's call it, regulations and standards. And then we've got the legal side. And you can get hit on all three, because obviously if a patient gets sick, they're going to come in and they're going to look at your standards, and then it's going to end up in court. So, it's sort of like penny wise and pound foolish. But how do we get from here to there? That's the challenge. And like I said, that's through process and through mapping out change and, working with the teams and being part of the team, saying, look, we got to meet in the middle somewhere here. I can't possibly do 20 cases a day with these new standards or what these new tools that I have to use to do the job. So how do we get from here to there? That's the real tricky part.
Okay. So well said. I appreciate the knowledge there. Next thing, let's say certification. You hear a lot about it. You hear people talk about it. How important is it? We had an interesting conversation when people were saying, hey, I recommend certification. We have people that are in the business that are not certified, but been in a department for years. You have departments that recommend or not recommend, or you have to be certified within a certain amount of time. You have departments that say, hey, don't worry about the certification. As long as you're here, you're doing a good job, I don't worry about it. What is your take on certified versus non-certified?
Yeah, I think it's crucial. I think it's crucial to the profession, and it's sort of the turtle and the rabbit race because the turtle is going to be certification and eventually having that required throughout all of the states. We saw this in other industries that ended up requiring certification. And as a natural outcome of that, that's where the income raised afterwards. We never like to, we don't lead on that because certification directly affects patient quality. But we have to acknowledge also that any profession that raises the bar and requires that certification, that's really going to help us towards getting the income inequality that we see out there with this profession.
Okay, we're going to touch more on that, but let me take a quick commercial and we'll be right back. Welcome back. Welcome back. I'm here talking with my good friend David DeGrossi. We're getting deep into the thick of things. We're going over just everything that we learned this season. Right now, we just touched base on certified versus non-certified. His take on, hey, he feels like certification is the way to go because it just drives like the financial compensation part of somebody growing in the business. But when you say that, are we saying that a career ladder would keep somebody in the business? But one of the people that were on the panel, not on the panel, but one of the guests that came into the comments was like, hey, I've been in the business for, I think she said like 7 years or whatever, and never had any errors. It's not her passion, but she comes in every day, does a really great job, no complaints, no errors, and is thriving in the business. It just wasn't her passion. But no complaints, no errors. Is that still a typical employee? Is that still an employee that you would want in your department?
Yeah, I mean, sure. Look, as a manager or as a hospital or a department, you always have to have a broad enough spectrum, enough room. You look at when you do evaluations, right? Sometimes evaluations are based on um, a zero or a 1 through 5, right? With 5 being outstanding and maybe on the opposite end of the spectrum. You gotta be able to accommodate a department where you have people who are 3s and people that are 4s and people that are 5s. Now we know that we have to have robust programs in place for people that might be a 1 or a 2 because the expectation of the department is that everybody's a 3, right? So everyone has to be able to perform at a certain level of consistency and quality. Uh, and then you mentioned the career ladder really is key because that really prevents you from becoming what I like to call the training factory, for the hospital up the street. Because if you don't have the ability to grow within your department, I'm going to grow moving up the street to another hospital. So I have a pretty unique way of looking at that. It's tiered, the ability to be an aide in the department, and then a non-certified technician, for example, and then a certified technician, and then before you would leap to becoming a supervisor, um, or a lead, whatever the title would be, there is what I call a service technician. There's one even in between that where you're taking on different not only are you acquiring more knowledge and experience, but you're also taking on more responsibility within the department because those of you that have been managers or those of you that have been supervisors, you are only as good as your team. There's no way a manager or a single supervisor can possibly get done what's expected of them literally all on their own. You have to delegate. You have to have team members that are willing to step up and perform, beyond what, if you're working in a department where there's only technician as a job title, um, you're going to have to perform outside of that title and really step up because nothing will get done in that department. So, it's pretty unique, but the career ladder is definitely something that can facilitate that. And, going back to what you kind of touched on earlier, um, there's a delicate balance out there between kind of going out there and saying, hey, hey, hospitals, you could all just, require certification as a health system. In some instances, that makes it a little tougher when we're trying to pass legislation in a particular state. We're trying to pass the laws that require the certification because the legislators and the people in the government look and say, hey, what do we need this law for if the hospitals can just require it? You know, um, and then what we get with that is inconsistency. Not every hospital might require it. Some hospitals might require it, and then um, but are they recognizing the certification? So there's a little slippery slope there too, or a little balance that we have to find in the middle between going out there and saying, hey, why doesn't everybody just require it, or and the difference between passing a law in the state. The passing the law in the state is really crucial, like I said, to elevating the profession, um, because
Right.
it's something mandated by the government. It's required by law, so that really makes a difference.
Okay. Okay. Another kind of hot topic that we had was employee engagement. Employee engagement. How do you have those tough conversations? What do you do to get it from shift versus shift, or OR versus SBD? What are some tactics that you can share that make those conversations easier for managers or easier for directors or even easier from staff to leadership?
Yeah, it's I would always work with my team, and I happen to have one of my day shift leads. Phyllis was a awesome lead on day shift, and I would use resources whatever people were comfortable with. In certain areas, people might feel more comfortable going to Phyllis with an issue than maybe going directly to me with an issue. Sometimes staff look at things where, like, if they came to me, they were like bringing it to the office, but like letting Phyllis know about an error or a mistake or something people were doing wasn't as like bringing it to the office. So you kind of find a niche there of where people are comfortable, but you got to deliver. When people come to you and there's an issue, um learning as a manager, it's not easy, and even as a lead or a supervisor,
Right.
there is definitely a golden rule. I'm a very animated and, let's say, emotional person. Like, I kind of wear who I am on my sleeve. I'm passionate about everything I do. And if
Right.
you come to me and say, so and so is back there using rubbing alcohol and all the instruments, I might run out of my office and go, but what you got to learn to do is take what people tell you. If it's not a life or death situation, if you can wait until the next day or wait a couple hours to process it and make a decision, it's going to make a heck of a difference. Because a guy like me who runs on that passion, I'm going to jump on that passion and be like, what are you doing using rubbing alcohol? And then you find out, no, he only did it on one instrument that had it in the IFU, let's say, but in the immediacy of that, that's one of the tricks of the trade you learn as a lead or a supervisor, is just, especially when it's a person to person issue. You take what person one is telling you, you take what person two is telling you, and then you got to take the time to kind of digest that and figure out what's going on there in the middle. And there's a lot of resources in the hospitals today, human resources and employee relations. Um, it's good to try to get ahead of this stuff and to build teams. It's hard as maybe a new manager coming in to a dynamic, but if you're in a hospital and it's going well, make sure you keep it going well, because we might tend
Right.
to focus on the technical stuff, but the people stuff is more important, I would say, because if we're not getting along together, what do you care about an IFU if you know, if I'm
Right.
mad at you right now, Ken, and I can't even see straight, right? So the employee, the people part is as essential, I would say, if not more than the technical part, because you
so
can't
that
have
leads
one without the other.
so that leads into something else that we had a very very intense conversation about the mental health. Uh, just leaving it at the door if you can, or from a manager standpoint, recognizing when somebody's not okay. I know they say we talk about not wanting to be babysitters, and there's these are adults, but as you being the leader, recognizing when your staff is not okay, being able to bring them in, talk to them, having that mental toughness.
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah. And you're right, Ken, because a problem at home and or in your life can manifest itself on the floor with, me being mad at you doing something with your count sheets. And then when you get somebody in the office and you're able to have that empathy or that compassion for people, then you find out they open up and say, "Look, I'm sorry, I got all this stuff going on in my life." And it kind of brings things into perspective. I mean, look, we're always going to have, like we said, the let's call it 5% of people who just want to burn the department down, but a lot of times it's misunderstood. We all handle, I mean, look, I don't want to disrespect anything by comparing it to combat or what people go through in war or thing like that. But this is a very stressful job. It is traumatic because it's fast paced, it's intense, and we have people's lives in our hands.
Right.
Now, you and I might react differently. You're a military guy. You have military background. Ken, you've seen, and I don't, and I'm not military background, but I know enough military people, and I think I grew up in a crazy enough neighborhood to understand that people will react differently in really intense situations. And like you said, and sometimes that could just manifest itself in different ways. And you just try to get to the root cause and at least have an approachable environment. Yeah, how many times do people say, "I have an open door policy," and then then the door is always physically closed? You got to be comfortable or let the staff know that you're truly comfortable. They should be comfortable enough to come to you at any given time. And or if it comes to that where they end up in the office in a situation that they could speak to you one on one, and you're gonna follow up and take that to heart, whatever they're telling you.
Shout out to the process. I saw Denard had posted something about that like a couple of weeks ago. Like, is it truly an open door policy? If
Yeah,
if the door's closed or open, what does that open door policy look like?
yeah,
How comfortable can an employee be if the door is closed?
yeah,
So yeah, I guess it's people are talking about it. That is like, because people want to be comfortable. Like you said, that is the key.
yeah,
And I feel the same way. If somebody has something going on at home, and their
yeah.
outlet is coming to work and wanting to talk about it, you should be able to sit down with them and have that type of conversation. So yeah, I think we're on the same page there.
That gets into the whole communication thing, Ken, like tone and body language. What if the door is open and I turn around and you could just see without me saying a word? Look, I'm Sicilian, man. I get hot. I get like this vein pops out of my neck and I turn red. I don't have to say anything, and I could clearly make you feel like you're interrupting or bothering me, right? So without saying a word, it's tone and body language too.
Right, right, right. So I guess the big one is last show that we did. We talked about who's in your village, who makes SPD what SPD should be, who do you rely on to have a full support, everything you need to run smoothly, who is in your village, who should they reach out to, who would you call on to make your SPD 100%. Who would you include in your village, Dave?
Oh, please. I have a tremendous village. I mean, look, you guys are in that village, man. I love this whole new generation of folks like yourself and Sharon, and you mentioned Denard. I love it, and I've always felt like, in life, coming from a loud Italian family, my mother said to me, look, you're always going to be louder than people, so you have to make sure that you use that loudness for the people that might not be as loud as you. So I've always kind of made it my mission to make sure, even when I served 6 years on the board with HSPA, things move fast. But wait, hold on. If three other people aren't speaking on the board, what do you have to say? What's your opinion on this? So I think it's crucial that voices are heard, and these formats now really give people that opportunity. If you're in your department, you have a voice. Use it. You don't have to be as loud as me or as animated as me, but you can go to your manager or supervisor and suggest a change. Um, you do have a voice, and your manager, a lot of people will go and point out a problem, but even better if you have a solution and you say, look, I noticed this isn't working so well, but I have an idea where we could maybe improve it. That's always like the win-win right there. But yeah, but my village consists of, Sharon, Sharon Golden, Damian Berg, Mark Duro. There's a group of us in Connecticut here. Troy Cambone works over in Falmouth. Ed Casey. There was a group of us that kind of grew up in the business here in Connecticut as technicians, and then we all became supervisors, managers, and beyond. And that could seem real cliquey sometimes, but don't misconstrue. It's an open village. We're not warring villages. Like, everyone's welcome to my village, and I assume it's vice versa to everyone else, because I've gone to the national meeting and you see groups, or how about you just go to a state chapter meeting and the same group sit at the same table. I always try to encourage people to mix it up. This is your chance to meet new people and get new ideas. So yeah, the village, it does take a village, man, because we're the only ones that understand this business and what we go through. So you need that support. And you even as I moved on to the other side here with consulting, on the consulting side of this profession, it can tend to be more business-like, more cutthroat. But you could ask anybody I've worked with that I've carried over that same philosophy that, a rising tide will lift all the boats. I'm not in competition. You know what we're in competition with is the infection rates and people dying from surgery. You're not in competition with Dave Jagrossi. You're not in competition with Ken. We're all in competition with death. You know what I mean? And illness. So if you keep that as your focus, and I've always kept that as my focus, it's real easy to say, like I said earlier, oh, the patient and patient safety. But if you truly, really take that to heart and make that your mission, I mean, nothing's going to stop you. Nothing's going to get in your way. That passion will come through. As you can see, Ken, here, you said, I'm always on fire and always like on a mission. That is my mission, is to make sure that, this profession improves itself, and therefore we improve patient safety. So I think it's a great concept, and I love the way when you guys all get on. You guys all started that with calling it the family, man. I like that.
Oh yeah,
You're
the
like, hey,
family.
the SPD family. Yeah.
Yeah, the family always shows up to show out. So we are here again. That's great that you said what you said. So that segues into what I want to talk about next, and that's where do we go from here as an industry? Where do we go from here as a family? So I'm gonna run another commercial, and when we come back, I want to get your take on SPD as a whole. Where do we go from here? After this commercial, I'll be right back with Dave. Welcome back, family. Again, special thanks to Kalzura. The Oakland Village, and everybody can, be a part of anybody's village. And we hope that that's for everybody. I'm glad that I'm a part of your village. I'm glad you're a part of my village, and the knowledge and stuff that we can share back and forth. We talked about certifications versus non-certifications and building a career ladder. We know that all of these things are changing. We know that the technology is changing. We know that the industry itself is changing. You being a former past president, you can see the changes that have happened. So, with that said, I've seen some great things being announced, such as the Mercy Ship. Some things
Yeah.
that the SBA has put out there that, hey, we're taking part in, some great things like that. Where are we headed as a whole as the industry as it pertains to the industry? Where do you see us headed?
Yeah, it's interesting. Here's where I think we need to head. COVID really taught us a lot of lessons. I think if it did anything, it taught us what we already knew, and that's how important we are. But what I hope more importantly that it did is that it taught the rest of the hospital and the administration how important SPD is. Um, how do we kind of come out of COVID? So here's sort of my take with that is that we shut down elective surgery during COVID and they said, go home, SPD. Now, with that being said, if I were to say to you, shut down surgery, I would say any department needs about 3 months that we can sharpen the saw. And when I say
Right,
that, I like to use that analogy that if you cut wood, when you're not cutting wood, you're sharpening the saw, right? So
right,
between dusting the shelves and cleaning out those instrument cabinets and training ourselves, there's always probably about 3 months of work at hand, right? So they said,
right,
go home. So people went home and people had to feed their families and get other jobs because a lot of the places weren't paying people. Then they said, come back because we're now allowed to reprocess these masks, these N95 masks.
right,
And and I think we're all still living with staff shortages, right?
right,
So now we're kind of in a weird situation where I administration do they acknowledge that and do they see that because they're paying, and I don't I'm not knocking travel agencies at all, but they provide a very valuable service. But how is hospital administration able to put this amount of money out for travelers, but then the golden diamonds that they have in their own facilities, they won't invest in, or like you said, Ken, create a career ladder to retain them. You're spending the money here, but you won't do it there. So I think as a profession, I mean, we need to head towards professionalism in that sense, that we're recognized as the experts that we are and that we're elevated to that status where we don't have to become travelers to make bigger money, or we don't have to move up to the hospital up the street. It'd be nice to like the old days to be able to stay in a healthcare facility for 20, 30 years and you did your whole career there. Because as you know, by you're a Jedi master by that point, in working in an SPD that long. But
right,
um but I think as an industry, technology is coming. You're going to see a lot of robotics. I mean, you guys see what's out there. They got apps on your phone that recognize instruments. So, Sharon Green Golden always warns about this. The greatest technology is still run by humans. So we have to make sure that there's a balance to that. And how do we incorporate all of this and then with the goal of there being, the best product we could put out? Um, I think we need to start looking at what we do more as industry. I think a lot of times we get away from the fact that we do manufacturing, and there's a lot of practices in manufacturing that apply to SPD. A lot of quality. We build products. So if you just think about that conceptually, you can build your processes that way where there's checks and balances and quality built into the process so that you're putting out a good product. So it's hard. Now, this Monday, I'm heading over to Spain to the World Federation meeting. Um, I'm going independently, but the HSPA will be there, the board. So HSPA is part of a larger global group called the World Federation uh, of Central Sterilization. So they meet once a year, and I really, I get to go over there and kind of see what the crystal ball is a little bit and what's coming. Last year, like I said, I saw a lot of robotics. I saw sterilizers um, that eliminate the need for Bowie Dick test. They're looking for wetness in the steam. They're looking for air pockets. There's a lot of technology coming. But again, how do we balance that with, somebody coming in and just pressing a button, or somebody coming in and knowing what happens when they press
Right.
the button?
So, with even like that, so you say with that smart technology coming, so stuff like that, will it decrease our FTEs, or do we get to keep the FTEs and still incorporate the smart technology? That's the key to the equation. Is this smart technology replacing or adding to?
Yeah, well, I think it's supplementing now, because think about what we talked about earlier, Ken. As these medical devices become more complex, we're going to need technology, but we're also going to need more people, because what 10 technicians used to do is now going to take 15 or maybe 20, because we got to follow every IFU. I have to, document every step of an IFU or whatever the demands are to reprocess that instrument. I mean, even some of these automated machines, as you guys know, with these sophisticated irrigating sonics out there, they take a while to load up, right? It takes a while to
Right.
do all the connections, and then it's manual. But I think it's going to supplement now, and I think we touched on it before we went live, Ken. I think consolidated and off-site sterile processing centers are really going to be what the future is coming. They're already here in the United States, and it's logistically and just financially, there's a number of reasons why it works, um, and it works better. It might not be for every facility, but in a lot of instances, whether the hospital does it, and actually what we're seeing is independent ones popping up, where it's
Yes.
just you can go and work for this independent sterile processing center. So I think that's going to be one of the big waves coming across the U.S. In the next couple of years here, because it's already happening now.
But I see the change is among us. Dave, it's been a pleasure having you go through and just let everybody know what has happened this season. I'm honored to have had your insight. Uh, again, with the family
Thank you,
in
buddy.
tow, with the family, we've had an amazing run this season. Had some outstanding professionals and guests on the shows that like yourself have been world traveled and came on and gave us great insight into some of the facilities that they've been into, and again offered their perspectives like yourself. And I couldn't have done this without y'all. So I'm glad that the open villages have come
Yes.
together to give us one big village. And
I'm
your
always
take on
here.
it.
Just because I'm a consultant, don't think I'm going to send you an invoice if you ask me a question. If you ask me a bunch of questions, I might, but we're still accessible, myself and others that are on that other side. All right.
That I think that's what people want is that they can shoot you. They got your website up there, hoping that they can shoot you an email if they have a question, and you be accessible to them.
Absolutely.
Like you said, you were at the conference last year, and just being able to come up to you and talk to you. I think people are now, hey, that's David. I know him now. I can go talk to him.
Yeah. He's much
So,
louder in person.
hey, I had the pleasure to hear you speak. So, yes, you are much louder in person. You're good. Hey, everybody, that's Mr. David DeGrossi. He was here with us, sharing his knowledge
Congratulations,
and
man.
insights.
1 year, one
Thank you. Thank
season.
you. One season down, more to come. More
Good
to
for you.
come. Sir, I appreciate you. I thank you. I thank you. I thank you. Hey, much love to you, sir.
Take care, man. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
We'll talk soon.
Family. Thank you. Thank you. Family. This has been Time to Talk Season 1 finale. Thank you for an amazing ride. We made it. We made it. We made it. Again, new techs, senior techs, leaders, managers, directors, all of the above. This is the place where you come to get that insight. This is a place where you can come, talk, and let out, get some knowledge, share your knowledge. We are here for you. This is the people's platform. This is just season 1. Imagine what will happen in season 2. Imagine what we can accomplish. I am here for you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. It's been a great ride. Again, I couldn't have done this without my family members. I'm glad everybody was here. I am glad you were here. I am Kenneth Campbell. This has been a time to talk. I also, if you go to neverlosefocus.net, I have the Time to Talk merchandise available. Get you a shirt, get you a sweatshirt. There's even masks. There's cups, there's water bottles, everything you want to support Time to Talk. Get it today. New merchandise is out there. I am here for you. Again, thank you, everybody. Thank Calzura. Get your set of Rebels. Again, Calzura, the shoe itself. IFU is on one source, the only shoe out there that can be thermally disinfected, can go through the sterilizer. Make sure you treat your feet. Make sure you treat your feet. We will be back in a couple of weeks with season 2. I cannot wait for that. I'm so excited about the lineup that I have for you. I'm super, super excited. More information to come on that. But for now, thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm super excited. We had a great season. Again, thank you, thank you, thank you. I appreciate each and every one of you. And it's been a time to talk. Thank you, thank you, thank you.